I think the Magi are very interesting to me, knowing how long it kind of takes them to show up, and that they are, following this idea of this intellectual path, right? Like studying the stars and seeing this new thing that happened. And I was reading about some things around like the astrology of the time and all these astrologers seeing these changing signs and that, different stars and planets are rising into different houses and all this. And I just think it's interesting. These were people who were on the lookout with a hunger. And when I think about the Magi, like I want to know people in our world today with that kind of hunger to know what's going on, to know what God is up to in the world. Like that attitude of like searching it and wanting that so much, being willing to just, travel. Days and days and days for them. I don't know. I'd like that attitude, that inspiration, like that. I don't know, the whole impetus to like go out to seek so fervently. I just find that really inspiring for me because I don't see a lot of that in our world today, honestly. I think convenience is a big part of how we are. It's a big part of our culture, I think. Convenience, this idea of like it's great when it's kind of easier. Or, God really comes in the most troubled moments, which I think that's true, right? In the middle of crisis, God shows up and sometimes shows up the most powerfully and feels the closest to us. But, what about those other times? Like, are we really on the lookout? Like, are we looking for what God is doing? And I find that, I don't know, kind of convicting and inspiring all at the same time. Like, I want to be like that,
I'm really touched by these men, and they really are wise because they were on the lookout for something that they wanted to see and be a part of, a hunger and thirst for it, just like you were saying. I think the thing that makes the wise men kind of hard to maybe get an accurate read on is how the timeline is messed up, with our modern day thinking of the night Jesus was born and when the Magi got there. What we believe is that the night that Jesus was born, the star appeared. The Magi in Babylon, way off to the east, they saw the star and it was only visible for a short period of time and it went away. And these Magi were 1,000 miles away. And they, as being astronomers, they recognized the star. And then they said, like, well, what does that star mean? And what does it mean? It appeared and it went away, and it's right over this land of Judea and Israel. These guys, they searched to try to figure out what that star could mean. And they ran across one Bible verse in the book of Numbers. And it comes out of a real weird story of Balaam and Balak and a sorcerer that's trying to put a curse on the people of Israel. And every time he gets ready to speak a curse, he speaks a blessing. And one of those blessings he speaks is that a star is going to rise out of Israel, and there'll be a scepter coming from the people of David. And those guys picked up on that. To me, that seems like a little clue. I would go over that and miss it, if I were skimming the book of Numbers. Have you read it? The book of Numbers? But they caught on to that because they knew another wise man or Magi by the name of Daniel earlier. And so they must have had attention upon the writings of Daniel, his God, and his people. And there was a lot of prestige that Daniel brought to Babylon for belief in God. And his three friends in the fiery furnace, those guys. So they're searching through this. And on the basis of that Bible verse, that one little scrap of Scripture, they decided to put a caravan together, which was hundreds of people to take care of them, guards to come along to protect them. It was a journey that may have taken them 6 months to a year. It was a huge thing. So the timeline's messed up because the wise men arrive about a year to maybe a year and a half after Jesus was born. So, the way we celebrate Christmas, that, they showed up right after the shepherds did. We try to get all parts of the story together at one time. But these guys had such a passion. They wanted to come and see and be present. And these were not followers of God. These were people that we might consider pagan. But they wanted to know the real God. And I admire that.
And I think those stories, Daniel, right, not getting eaten by lions, the three friends not getting burned up when they were thrown into this fiery furnace. I mean, there was weight to those stories, and I think it highlighted that. And I was reading, they were talking about, they were astrologers too, right? That was kind of like dominant religion and everything. And they were talking about how, like, the different planets were called gods. All of our planets that we have were named after these different gods and stuff. And what happened during that time is that something had shifted, and this planet or this god was rising into this different constellation or into this house. And like that signaled some big old shift was happening in the world. And I think when they saw that, right, like everybody was aware that something was changing, that something big was going on. And when they thought about that, they said, okay, they see this star and they go, okay, something big is happening. That's a sign there. And then they start getting back to some of these connections, this miraculous God who's more powerful than everybody else. And I think that's what ultimately gets them going over there. And that's inspired.
And then they travel all the way back to Jerusalem, and they say, well, we need to check in with the king, King Herod.
He has no idea.
He's another one of the characters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a bad character.
Right.
I don't like him.
Yeah.
Just like any other, two-bit politician that's just in for everything himself. I don't like him.
Herod the Great, though?
Yeah, I think he's Herod the Small, like Herod the Great. He gave himself that name.
Of course.
Okay.
As good kings do.
And so he hears the wise men, and he plays, oh, I'm all so concerned. Oh, well, you go find this child and let me know where he is, because I want to come worship him too. He just wanted to eliminate Jesus. These wise men, they knew he was a two-bit tyrant. They had been around those kind of kings before. And so they left Jerusalem, and as they went, it says the star appeared and led them right to the house where Jesus was. And then how they honored Jesus. They gave him gifts that you would give a king. And they recognized and affirmed that he was going to be the King of Kings. And they went back and they told their Babylonian, their pagan world about that. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think about Herod, right? Like how clueless he is. Because I think that's the best part, right? Like imagine they come, they're like, hey, we're here to worship the king. And he just has this look of like, what are you talking about? I love that he's just so absolutely clueless because he is so self-focused, so full of himself. He's so unaware of everything happening around him.
People that are self-focused don't see what God's doing. It's just all about them. And then all of the religious scholars that he said, he referred to, he called his scholars together and said, well, where's the child born? He didn't know. And none of those guys went to see him. I mean, like, he was surrounded by wise men that weren't wise. A bad king, bad character. Don't like it.